Go ahead.
Okay, good morning, everyone. The way that we have organized this morning is that I'm gonna do the first chunk of the PowerPoint and do some work within Qualtrics. And then Colleen is gonna take over and do the bigger chunk. She got the short straw. And she's gonna do the bigger chunk in working with some data within Excel and using the plugin EZAnalyze. And so that's, and if we stay on time and don't talk too much, then we should have time for some Q&A at the end. If somebody has a burning question, I think I'd like to try and take that, and we may pause for a question or two in the Qualtrics segment. We also have the chat available, and so please feel free to put questions in the chat, and we will we'll try and address those as we can. John will be monitoring that. I did see the question about being in Qualtrics. Since we haven't shared the survey with everyone, there's probably not a need to follow along, but you're certainly welcome to log into Qualtrics and kind of look and familiarize yourself with the menus as I'm talking and working through that. So to get us started, John, would you kind of stop sharing, and then I will start sharing from my end. So I've now got my PowerPoint open, and I'm going to go through a few slides to kind of orient us to what we're going to look at in Qualtrics, and then we'll actually spend time in Qualtrics, and then I'm going to hand it off to Colleen. So buckle up, and here we go. Let's see if I can make it work. Okay, so in working within Qualtrics, there are a number of tabs, and most of you are familiar with the survey tab. That's where you create a survey and work within it. There's also a data tab that allows you to look at the individual responses. And there are some other tools within there. We'll briefly look at some of the raw data. There's also a cross-tabulation tool that can be useful to use. And then also within this tab is the ability to import data if you already have some data in an Excel spreadsheet. But by and large, that's not something that you would generally use. If you do a survey and it's a paper and pencil survey, Qualtrics is a really good tool for using it for data entry to create that spreadsheet file. And so you just create a survey that mimics the paper and pencil version. And then either you or a volunteer or a staff person enters the survey data, survey by survey, and then it gets saved in Qualtrics and then ready to use otherwise. And if you do import entire spreadsheets into Qualtrics, that can take a few minutes to do. But for the most part, you're going to be working with data where people have responded directly into Qualtrics, given their answers to an evaluation instrument, a pre-test, post-test, or post-test then pre, different kinds of instruments, but the data is going to be in there. And so, and you can use Qualtrics to take a look at that. So going to the next slide here, the report tab is where you can go to get the basic summary information. And the default report will show you the results for each question. It automatically loads some, a graph for the distribution of that question. And so, and the visuals can help you kind of quickly grasp what's going on. So we'll take a look at that. You can also modify those graphs and then output it as a report if you want. One of the things that I like to do is to translate the number of responses that people have made for different questions into percentages. And so we'll take a look at that. And it gives you the simple descriptive statistics for questions. And it sets the stage for kind of being familiar with the results of your survey. And then you can also download those reports into Word or into PowerPoint. In addition to getting basic descriptives, going back to the data analysis tab, there's a cross-tabulation tool. And this allows you to do a couple of things. It's useful for looking at pairs of questions. So one example would be to look at what clients perceive their knowledge gain to be by different locations that you delivered the program. Or if you wanted to see if men differed from women and how much they learned, that would be another type of crosstab that you could do. And then yet another example would be if you used a pre-test and post-test questions, you could cross-tabulate those to see how many who were low on the pre-test were now high on the post-test and things like that. One of the important things to keep in mind about crosstabs is this second point here, that you want to think about which variable is your dependent variable or the outcome that you're most interested in, and which is the independent variable or the explanatory variable. So the rule of thumb there is that when you calculate percentages, you want those to total to 100 within each category of the independent variable. And I'll show you what that looks like within the crosstabs procedure. And it's, like everyone else, it takes me a minute to figure it out and make sure I've got it right. But it's very important to keep that in mind. So the crosstabs, it works well for percentages and counts. So most of the questions that we ask in surveys are suitable for the crosstab tool. But sometimes when we ask people questions, on a scale of 1 to 100, which is has lots of categories, or if we ask people questions like how much water did you save over this last month, those kinds of questions are not as suitable for this tool. So let me stop here. I want to quickly check the chat.
So Yvette was talking about connecting pre and post test. That's the most recent question I explained to her, or I wrote in here, with the opportunity to create participant IDs. So there's some ways in which to do that with birthdays and stuff like that. The second question, the second point I put is, with retrospectives, the data's in the same survey, so there's not the need to couple it. So that makes things a little bit easier.
Right. And I've worked with data sets both ways. And one way to think about it is the retrospective pretest post-test is probably the easiest way to do that. But having a separate pretest and post-test, it's generally easier to work with that data outside of Qualtrics. You use Qualtrics to collect the data, but the analysis is easier to work with outside of Qualtrics because it's merging the two data sets together can be a little tricky. But as John pointed out, it's really important to have an ID number in there, or some kind of ID field, so that you can match up those pre-tests and post-tests. Okay, I'm going to go into Qualtrics now, and so for this workshop, for this webinar, we created kind of a practice survey, and it's got a handful of questions in here. And this is not a survey development workshop, so we're not going to talk too much about the questions themselves. But I do want to focus on the tabs up here. So there's the survey tab with the specific, where I've got my specific survey open. And then there's a data analysis tab, data and analysis tab. And this is the one that I was talking about in the slide a few minutes ago. So this is our first stop in our tour in Qualtrics. And at the moment, we've got a message that the responses are being indexed. So this is some data that we stuck in here for illustration purposes, and sometimes this happens. And so we're kind of paused at the moment.
You gotta love when technology helps, right?
Sometimes it works faster if you go to the report first. I don't know why.
All right, well, I'll click on the reports tab and we'll see if Colleen's right on this one. So there, all right, there's that. I'm gonna go back now. Oh, come on.
Just click on crosstabs and see if it works.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so the data's there, so. There we go. Okay, so when you go to data and analysis, as many of you who have been using Qualtrics, you're probably familiar with this, but it displays each of the individual responses, and under the actions column, you can do, that allows you to edit responses. You can also display the entire response, those sorts of things. But in terms of getting ready, to summarize your data, this in and of itself is not terribly useful. There are some other tools in here. We'll come back to the crosstabs in a minute. But let's jump ahead to the reports, because this is where we see the summary results for all of the respondents for each question. And right off the bat, there's some nuances here that we'll want to pay attention to. The very first question in the survey asked people what agency they work for. And that was, so that's a categorical question. And, but the way that this question was structured, or the type of question, it's treated as an open-ended question, and we don't actually get any frequencies for that. When we go down to the next question, how confident are you in your ability to conserve water? This was set up as an agree, disagree response scale. So, and this is before the program. So this is our kind of pre-test question on a evaluation instrument that asks both pre-test before and after responses. So in the pre-test, we get the counts. You can see in the scale down in the bottom here, we get the counts of the number of people that were responding to that category. Now, for comparison purposes, I'm more interested in the percentages. So it's here somewhere. Here we go. Under page options, nope, it's not there. I forgot where it is. There we go. What I didn't do was scroll down far. So let me get back to where I want to be. So please bear with me, folks. So once I've clicked on the figure, now I have some options here. And as I scroll all the way down to the bottom, there we go, metric. What I really want to select here is the percent. And so notice my visualization has changed. And now I've got the percents. And I can also change the scale as well. But looking at the percents, having that set up as percents is useful, because when I go down to the next question, question 2, which is about after the program, and I change that to percent also. Now I can see what the percentage for strongly agree, and I can compare that with the percent for before. And so by seeing what the number is, and also the shape of the bars, notice that the shape of the bars here are higher above than below. So the basic point here is that within Qualtrics, in the default report, we can look at the distributions for all of the items in the survey. Now, one thing I wanted to point out is that when you design your survey, the question type that you pick affects the output that you get in the default report. So this question here, what was the amount of time in minutes that you spent scouting for pests before this program? That was done as an open-ended question, and so we get the verbatim responses here in a table, but we don't get any statistics, and we don't get any bar charts or anything like that. And it's because we're treating that question type is treated as a as a text response rather than a number. So one of the advantages to downloading to Excel is that those numeric responses that people put in for this open-ended question, we can analyze with statistics. Okay, now I'm going to go back to, go all the way back up here. We've kind of quickly looked at what the default report generates for us. There are other tools that that you can use. You can filter on other variables and other sorts of things, but this particular tool is most useful for just looking at the distributions and descriptive statistics for individual questions. Going back to the data analysis tab, this is where we can use the cross tabs, and so I'm going to select on that. This allows us to look at two variables at the same time. I'm going to close out a couple of these pop-up windows. Now, one of the things we might want to look at is, close these out. This is the default screen that you get. So you have a list of variables over on the left, and then you have a box for the column variable and a box for the row. And so you can actually build multiple tables at once, but I think it's best to focus on one crosstab at a time. So we'll do that. So we're going to bring the question one, how confident they were at the beginning of the program. I'm going to drag that item up to the columns. And then I'm going to get the follow-up question, question two, to the rows. So I've dragged two variables here. And then I also want to make sure that I tell it what I want to look at. So because I'm looking at the pre-test and post-test data, I'm going to use the column percentages in this case, because I'm treating the pre-test as the independent variable. So let me scroll over here a little bit, see if we can get this. There we go. I'm going to try and get more of the table to show up here. So on the pre-test, if we can look at, we've got 24 people have answered this. And so we know that 25% strongly agreed on the pre-test and strongly agreed on the post-test, 25%. And so this basically works out to one person. So here we've got some people that on the pre-test, they strongly agreed they knew how to conserve water, but on the post-test, now they say they somewhat disagree. And so you might say, man, that's not good. But what it might actually reflect is that they've learned something. So let's see if we can actually get scrolled over here. When we look at people who said they disagreed that they were confident in conserving, some people disagreed, and then, but on the post-test, they now somewhat agree. and some other disagrees are now neither agree nor disagree. So these are people moving in the positive direction. And likewise, on the somewhat disagree, we can see 33% that somewhat disagreed on the pretest now strongly agree. So this is an example of where you've got pretest, post-test, and you can see what's going on with those responses. Let me pause here and ask people if they have questions about how they would use the reports or crosstabs at this point.
So if you want to just unmute yourself and ask the questions, go ahead and fire away.
The way I've done it before, and maybe this isn't the right way anymore, is to get the weighted averages, weight all of your Likert scores, and then get a pre-test score and a post-test score, and then the difference is what you would report. So that, I guess they wanted it down to like one number, but with this, it's like, I can't imagine putting all that into an ROA, and I don't know, is that now the preferred way to go as opposed to taking your data, weighting it, getting the weighted difference, average difference?
Let me ask a question for clarification, Yvette. So are you talking about, with a Likert type item, are you talking about a single item, or do you have multiple items that you're putting together in an average and then comparing pre-test and post-test scores?
I remember it was multiple items, yeah.
Okay, so that's a case where the EZAnalyze tool that we're going to go into in just a few minutes is much more useful for doing the appropriate analysis. And then in addition to summarizing across items, you can do a t-test, which would tell you whether that change between the pre-test and post-test is large and significantly different from zero. But I'm getting ahead a little bit in terms of what that would look like. And in the interest of time, I'm looking at the clock and seeing that we've burned through a lot of time already. Let's move on, and but you'll get to see that in just a few minutes. Okay, if you were to report a simple percentage of knowledge gain in your report, would you add strongly agree and agree for that number? Generally speaking, I would focus on the kind of the positive side of the scale versus the negative side of the scale. So, but when you have both pre-test and post-test, what you're looking for in the case, like in this example, is the weight of the responses, the majority of the responses, are they moving in a positive direction versus those that are moving in a negative direction? And as long as the positive responses outweigh the negative, that's generally a good thing. Okay, I'm going to go back to the data tab here. And because the next thing we're going to do is focus on exporting the data so that we can use it in Excel in EZAnalyze. Now, in the PowerPoint slides that we sent out yesterday, that John sent out yesterday, it's got some comments in there, but in the interest of time, I'm going to walk you through the download procedure. And because there's a couple of things that you'll want to be careful about doing in that process so that you get the data in the right format for conducting the analysis in Excel. So to download your data, we're going to go to this export and import button and click on that, and then select export data. When you do that, you'll get this pop-up window. And old guys like me used to use the legacy exporter, but they've redone that. And just recently, I've learned some new tricks. And so the way that the new exporter works is actually nicer than the old one. So, but a couple of key things. First of all, on download, make sure that download all fields is checked, and that should be the default. And then you want to go to this radio button to use numeric fields or numeric values. And the importance of that is that statistics require numbers. And so even when you ask a question, a Likert type question of how satisfied or dissatisfied are you, or how much you agree or disagree, we need to assign numbers to those categories for the statistical analysis. If you use the choice text, you won't be able to do that. So make sure you've got the numeric values selected. And then next, go to this button that says more options, because we need to do more. When I select that, we've now got a scroll bar and we need to scroll down. And here there are going to be 3 buttons that you'll want to use or make sure that are checked. One of them is already checked, or at least for my menu here, split multi-value fields into columns. If you have questions that include the instruction, check all that applies, so that people will answer multiple things. To get the data in the right structure, you want to have that checked. And then in addition, you want to check recode seen but unanswered questions as -99. And you can change that value if you want, but I leave it as is. And then the second box I want to check here is recode seen but unanswered multi-value fields as 0. So what happens is that for a check all that apply question, if they check an item, it's going to be a 1. And if they don't check it, but they answered that question, it's going to be a 0. And that allows you to get the correct frequency counts in your data analysis. So make sure that you've got numeric values checked, and then these 3 items, the recode seen but unanswered questions, the recode seen but unanswered multi-value fields, and the split multi-value fields into columns. Once all those are checked, you're good to go. And you can see that Qualtrics automatically generates a file for you to download. You can either save that. I'm going to go ahead and open it. And Shazam, we have data. Now there's one more thing I want to point out here before we kind of jump into actually analyzing data in Excel. Notice that the first 3 rows in this data table have variable names and additional descriptive information. If you leave all 3 rows, that's gonna create some problems for your data analysis. So basically, go ahead and delete the second and third rows. So now you have just the top row with your variable names, and then from there on down, you have your actual responses from your clients. Okay, I'm gonna stop here because that was my piece to talk about, and turn it over to Colleen, and she's gonna introduce you to the analysis that you can do in Excel and using EZAnalyze.
I can go ahead and do it, John, because I'm just going to do a little bit of the PowerPoint at this point and then mostly do Excel. So I'll just show a little bit of the PowerPoint just kind of to give you some basic examples. If you really are scared of statistics at all, this is the simplest thing you can do in Excel, which is you can ask for the average, the median, and the mode. And the mode, if you don't remember, is the number that's repeated the most. You don't need that much in your reports, but some people like it. And the median is the exact number in the middle, and then the average is average. And what you do is at the end of a column or a row, whichever you would like, you write this equation, equal average, and then you put the cells that you want to have in there, and you can just click on each one, the first one, and then click on the second one. The very last one, sorry, not the second one, for what you want. And then for the more advanced, we go to EZAnalyze. And to do this, just Google EZAnalyze. And I did find that it does work on some Macs. It just doesn't work the same as this. So you're gonna have to play with it if you have a Mac. Sorry, I don't have one. So you just go on to Google, you download it, and then it will be in the add-in tabs. And the very important thing though is first to make sure that all of your data is either in a CSV file or an Excel file. And at the end, you will either see .csv or .xlsx, and that just means Excel. And really just remove, my advice is remove anything that seems extraneous. I mean, rows, columns, anything that you're like, I have no idea what this data is, just remove it. It makes it easier for you to work with. And then also, a very important part that I think some people forget is that this is your only data. Let's say you're not getting it from Qualtrics, you put it straight into Excel. Please make a copy of it before you do any kind of analyzing, because you don't want to mess up your only data source. It will be a big pain to go and put it back in if you can't put it back in. And then the only other thing is that, and I will start showing you all the things, is that make sure when you are on your Excel sheet that you are on the original raw data sheet whenever you want to go in and do something. So up here is add-ins, and that is where you will find EZAnalyze. It's the only add-in I have. So that is where you go to do all your analyzing. You click on this, and for your descriptive parts, which are probably what the average person wants the most, you can click here for percentages. If you would like to know the percentages of any variable, you can click here. You can do agency, you can click a bunch at once. And then what you do is you do that, and it will show up as a new sheet. And you will see each one like agency, and it gives you the frequency, the percentage of each, and for each input. And then you go down and you can see it with your other question you had, which was your pre-rating of confidence, and then your post-rating of confidence. And you can see the frequency of each one. This is useful just if you want to compare how many people were very confident before and very confident after. If you're putting that in your reporting and you don't want to put the whole big number. Sometimes it's average is what everybody uses. But if you're like, I want to say before I had 12.5% that were at, oh, this one's actually opposite, sorry. I did it the other way, sorry. Strongly is 1, like the good is 1. So before you had 16.6% that were good, thought it was a good thing, and then confident with it. And then later on you did it at 20.8%. So you had an increase there of a good percentage. Now, why I did this opposite is that I've seen a lot of people do this opposite. And so you just need to make sure when you are looking at your data to know where very strong is and where weak is and what's good and what's bad. Because people sometimes forget that going down might be the good part of your data instead of the bad part. So that might show improvement. And I did that on purpose, but just forgot when I was talking to y'all about it. And so if you want to go back and do analyze, if you are on this sheet, if you try to do it, it will give you this error. So basically what you have to do is go to the first sheet to get that. Also under description, you can do descriptive statistics. And this is what I find also useful, in that you can look at your mean, median, mode, whatever you want to look at, your minimum value, maximum value.
Holly, I'm going to interrupt you real quick. They need you to zoom in because they can't see.
Oh, sorry.
Or
Thanks.
bottom right-hand corner.
I'm trying to, it's just not doing it.
Nope.
Maybe if I take it off of this, I think that's what it is. Yeah, sorry. Thanks for letting me know. Okay, so if y'all can see now better, sorry about that. I have really good eyesight, so sorry. So here, the percentage, I'll go back to show you the percentages, but like I said, you just click on that and you click whatever you want and okay. And I don't think the box is getting any bigger as I zoom in, so sorry. You can do descriptive statistics. If it doesn't look any bigger, that's as big as it's gonna get because I think it's the exact same size, that box. So anyway, so I'll pick the pre and post rating, and you can pick the mean, and let's say you want the minimum and maximum and standard deviation. So standard deviation is where you are looking at basically the average distance a score is from the mean. That's what standard deviation is. It's the average deviation from the mean, for any of y'all who haven't taken statistics in a while. And so this will show, and it always shows this way, where your question is up top, and then whatever you wanted is down here. The thing that I like about this is it also shows you how many missing numbers you had and how many responses you had to that question. And you will get a mean and then what each standard deviation is. So standard deviation is used mostly in statistics to, if you want to look at one person and find out their standard deviation to see how far they are from the mean. But this gives you just an average of what each standard deviation is. And each time you go out, you have a certain percentage of the people that are inside of it. So on the first deviations, you have about I forget that one because I never use that one. But on the second deviation, you have 95%. And on the third deviation, you have 99% in there. And I think the first deviation is 68%. But
That's about right.
okay.
Colleen, we're, in terms of our time, we probably ought to jump to the t-test at this
Okay.
point.
So for the t-test, you will go to advanced, sorry. And this is the one that gives you the inference so you can look to other tests to see if you can infer this and that you can say this is likely to happen in other populations. This is helpful in saying that your data shows that you had an impact on other, you would have an impact on other programs as well with this, well, with the same program, but you would have it with other populations that are very similar. So with the t-test, what you can do is compare your, the most often is a paired t-test where you look at your pre-test and your post-test. And so I'm going to look at that for just the first one. And it shows that you had it higher with the pre-test and lower with the post-test, which was a good thing. But the problem is you have to look at your p-scores. If your p-score is not 0.05%, it's probably not considered a good t-test. So what the p-score means is you minus one minus that, and that's basically your percentage that you would be confident in. So with this one, I would only be 47% confident in that this would happen again. I will show you another one that I put in there that you're more confident with. So this one, the p-score is 0%. Now, I will say, never say you're 100% confident because we're not. Just say you are more than 95% confident or 99% confident, or do not say 100% confident because that's never how it works out. The computer just doesn't take you out to how far out the p-score is. Also with the t-test, you can use this, is not as common, but it's a one sample t-test. I find this the most helpful in satisfaction. Let's say you want to have a satisfaction rating of above 0. Just pick a number. It's satisfaction, you can do it for each number to make sure, but you want it to be above a certain one, and you do a 1 pair. And of course, it's way above because everybody's happier than 0. I don't think 0 was a choice, sorry. But you pick a 1. It would be better to pick a 1.
Hey, Colleen, what's the scale on the satisfaction one?
It was 1 to 5, so that's why I said 0 was not going to work.
Well, maybe 3 would be the.
Okay,
would be
that works.
value.
I think that's what I did in the example, but you know. So you do have some people at the 3, but then you have some people that are not. So you can basically say that it's not going to equal 3 and say that it's likely to be different than 3. Now, the problem with t-test with this is a lot of people want to be like, well, I can say I'm 95% sure if you saw a difference in your 2-pair test, you saw a difference of they increased by 2 points on the Likert scale, that I'm 95% sure that it will increase by 2 points. That is not what this does. You have to do something called a confidence interval, which can be done on more advanced statistical software. This just tells you that you're confident that it will make an impact and it will change the amount they are going for. And just to show y'all real quick other things, these are where the graphs are, and you can change any color, anything you want. This is where you create variables. And what I find the best thing is to find differences. And this is where you can find your average differences you can do an average of a column and then find your differences for each person. And then this is just where if you want to do what crosstab does in Qualtrics, you can do it here. And you can pick anyone, even though it says categorical variable, you can pick anyone you want to compare it to. And that's up to you. And then you compare these to it. And you just click what you want. I think that is basically all. Since we have a few minutes, I will show you just how these look. If you want to do a difference, you can do a pre-rating and post-rating. Oh, and you have to name it. I always forget this. So you will get that error if you don't. And this will tell you the amount they differ. You'll have some that are positive, some that are negative. I might have done it the wrong way since they're all negative. I probably picked the post and the pre, which if you do that, you're like, why is everything different? You go back and you do a new variable again to check yourself, which I always do. Or I might have picked satisfaction. But I did not, so that clearly was the way it went with that one. And so that just shows you the difference. You can also do averages here, which I just need to show that because here's where you can do an average. If you want an average of something, let's say of two things, you pick them together and you put it, and you gotta name it. This is helpful for when you were talking about you need to have a whole bunch of things that you average together. I do this for all of your Likert scales, average it for each person. And then you can do the difference for each person, or at the bottom, you can do like this, equals average. That thing I told you above, which you do this. I just go and click on it. And then you go down and you click on the other one you want. And then you will get the average for, that would be your pre-test. And then I would do the average again for the post-test. And then you would just at the bottom put the average for that column. And then you would just minus those two to get your overall average. And
okay, let's pause here.
Sorry, I have to go through it quickly.
We're almost out of the official time, although I'm happy to stay on and chat with folks about questions and data analysis issues that they have. So let's stop here and open it up for questions. Colleen, would you stop the share and we'll see who all we've got. We've got an army of people here. I've been answering some things in the chat, but feel free to turn your mic on and go ahead and ask a question. I'll be honest, we ate through, we were trying to cover a lot more than I think the time allowed. We were maybe a little over ambitious, but your feedback on that will also be very helpful. So let's see what people have for questions. And John, did you need to cover anything at this point also? You're muted.
We can't hear you.
I have been answering questions online. We do have one new question from Tia. She asks, what data are we trying to get from the t-test to report on our ROA? So usually my response to that is if you have a group level objective where you're trying to look at the difference between the pre and post test, you'd have to make sure that your objective is written in that way. But most of the objectives that I've seen with agents are looking at numbers or percentage of people that change knowledge or practices and behaviors. So it really depends on what your objective looks like.
Well, one of the ways in where the t-test is useful is when you do the, the pre-post comparison and the t-test is significant, that's an indication that the change is that people have made is large rather than small, because the interpretation of the t-test is that the test statistic tells you how likely that statistic is relative to chance. And so when Colleen was talking about the p-value, when the p-value is really small, like 1 in 1,000, then that means that the change that you see in people's scores is very unlikely to be due to chance and very much likely due to your work. So it just gives you extra confidence in saying that, hey, I really made a difference here. People had a big change, and so the t-test is further validation of that.
I think it's good to just put in the ROA as, because saying that you did this t-test and that you know it will impact future, so you can put it in the POW and the ROA part. But also it can be for really good if you're looking for funding for something. That's where I find it the most, because especially if you maybe had a program y'all were doing that lost funding, or you need funding or something like that, showing that it will continue to have impact. That it's not just this one group did it, but maybe no other group will have an impact on. So.
That answer your question, Tia?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Any other questions?
And I went through it fast, so if anybody needs me to show afterwards, I can stay on and show you whatever.
So while people are thinking potentially of some questions, I'll just go over a couple housekeeping items as well. So this was recorded, so I'll be sending out the recording to everyone. In addition, if you didn't get the PDF, I'll send that PDF out as well. And then we also have an assessment for this webinar. So if you have a few minutes, please share your thoughts on what you enjoyed, what we could improve, and what you got out of it. Because as we all know, we all have ROAs. So, all right, well, it's 11:30. If nobody has any questions, we really appreciate everyone joining in today. As I always say, if you have questions that pop up afterwards, please feel free to reach out to Glenn or I. We can help to walk you through some of those components of getting your data off Qualtrics and analyzing it in whatever way makes sense. So if we don't have any questions, everyone enjoy the rest of your day, and I look forward to connecting with you soon.